decades, U.S. planes and ships struck more than 13,000 targets. Stealth fighters kicked down the door, Strike Eagles pounded the ground, A-10 Warthogs fought a close-in gun battle deep inside enemy territory to rescue a downed crew. And through all of it, the newest, most advanced fighter in the United States Air Force never showed up. Not one sortie. It stayed home in training squadrons and homeland defense units thousands of miles from the shooting. And then something strange happened. In the budget that followed the war, the Air Force didn't quietly shelve that fighter. It more than doubled the order. From 129 aircraft to 267. Billions of dollars for a jet that skipped the war, built on a design that first flew in 1972. Older than most of the pilots who will fly it. That sounds like a mistake. It isn't. It might be the smartest bet the Air Force has made in 20 years, and the war over Iran is precisely the reason why. This is the story of the F-15EX Eagle II, and why the oldest silhouette in the sky just became the most wanted fighter in America. To understand why, you have to go back to a moment of genuine fear. In the late 1960s, American intelligence got its first hard look at a new Soviet aircraft, the MiG-25, and the West was rattled. Here was an enormous twin-engine machine that could push past Mach 3 and climb above 90,000 feet. Washington concluded it needed a fundamentally new air superiority fighter, and fast. The program that resulted was called FX, and McDonnell Douglas won it with a prototype called the YF-15A. The engineers who designed it made a decision that would echo for the next 50 years. They refused to compromise. They wanted overwhelming engine power, an enormous wing, deep fuel reserves, and acceleration that bordered on violent. Two Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines gave the aircraft a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1, meaning the F-15 did not merely climb, it stood on its tail and accelerated straight up into the sky. Top speed beyond Mach 2.5, a ceiling above 65,000 feet, a radar that could find targets more than 100 miles out, an extraordinary figure for the 1970s. It was the physical embodiment of a philosophy associated with the legendary American Colonel John Boyd. Energy, speed, and the power to dictate the terms of every fight you enter. And then it went to war, again and again, across decades and continents, and produced a record that has no equal in modern aviation. The F-15 family has scored more than 100 confirmed air-to-air kills. Its losses in air combat, 0, not 1. Half a century of dogfights, and no enemy fighter has ever shot an Eagle out of the sky. That statistic alone would justify a documentary, but it isn't actually the most remarkable thing about this airplane. The most remarkable thing is how much room the original design left for growth. In the 1980s came the F-15E Strike Eagle, transforming a pure air superiority fighter into a devastating precision bomber. Then came export versions. The F-15SA built for Saudi Arabia, the F-15QA for Qatar, each one quietly loaded with newer and newer technology, each one pushing the airframe further than its creators had imagined. The Eagle kept absorbing the future. But by the mid-2010s, the original fleet was dying. The F-15C and F-15D air superiority jets were over 30 years old, riddled with fatigue, cracks, and corrosion, demanding inspections and repairs that grew more expensive every year. The plan was to replace them with fifth-generation stealth. The F-22 Raptor arrived, and behind it, the enormous F-35 Lightning II program. It seemed obvious that the Eagle's era was ending. And then the plan fell apart. Raptor production was slashed from an original vision of 750 aircraft down to a brutal 187, largely because each one cost a fortune. There would never be enough F-22s to replace the F-15 fleet, and the F-35A, for all its brilliance, was never a direct substitute. It was built around an entirely different philosophy. Stealth is not free. Keeping weapons hidden inside internal bays means carrying fewer of them. And the size of those bays puts a hard ceiling on how big future missiles can be. Meanwhile, rising tension in the Pacific was rewriting the requirements. Suddenly, the Air Force needed range and payload on a scale that a compact stealth fighter simply cannot deliver. So the Air Force looked back at the Eagle and asked an uncomfortable question. Why spend 15 years waiting for a hypothetical future aircraft when the thing you actually need's already sitting in a hangar? Boeing, which had absorbed McDonnell Douglas back in 1997, had exactly the foundation required because it had spent years building those advanced export Eagles for foreign customers. The F-15EX did not begin on a blank sheet of paper, and that's precisely the point. It slashed development time, cost, and risk. But make no mistake about what's underneath that familiar 1972 silhouette. This is not an old jet with new paint. It's essentially a new fighter wearing a legendary shape. The structure is reinforced for a service life beyond 20,000 flight hours, roughly double a standard F-15. It's the first Air Force Eagle with digital fly-by-wire, moving control from mechanical linkages to computers, which for an aircraft this large makes it dramatically more stable, more predictable, more precise. It carries the AN/APG-82 ASA radar, scanning faster, tracking vastly more targets at once, far harder to jam, and capable of high-resolution mapping. Both cockpits were gutted and rebuilt around enormous touchscreen displays driven by a new mission computer with digital helmet-mounted targeting that lets a pilot look at a target and cue a weapon onto it. And because the Eagle II is emphatically not stealthy, survivability falls to an electronic warfare suite called EPAWS, designed to detect, classify, and locate threats, warn the crew, and actively disrupt enemy radars and missile systems. The Eagle II survives not by hiding, but by seeing first, jamming hard, shooting from far away, and fighting inside a network. Which brings us to the real reason the Air Force wants hundreds of these: firepower. Two General Electric F-110 engines push roughly 29,500 pounds of thrust each in afterburner, hauling a combat load of up to 29,500 pounds across as many as 25 hardpoints. In an air superiority configuration, it can carry 12 air-to-air missiles. With proposed expanded carriage systems and mounts on its conformal fuel tanks, that number climbs towards 16 AMRAAMs plus sidewinders and anti-radar missiles on a single aircraft. The Air Force is also working to integrate the AIM-260 JATM, a new long-range air-to-air missile developed as a direct answer to China's PL-15. No stealth fighter on Earth can carry that kind of load internally. And here's where it gets genuinely clever, because in modern war, an aircraft doesn't need to see the target itself. It can receive targeting data from other fighters, from AWACS, from satellites, ground radars, drones, and command networks. So picture the architecture. An F-35, or one day the 6th generation F-45, slips in close, finds the enemy, and passes the target to an Eagle II standing off at long range with 16 missiles under its wings. The stealth jet is the eyes, the old Eagle is the arsenal, a long-range squire to the invisible knights. And the F-15EX was built with open modular architecture, meaning new sensors, software, and weapons can be bolted on in months rather than the years and hundreds of millions that upgrades used to consume. A decisive advantage in an era racing from hypersonic missiles toward combat lasers. So why, with all that, did it sit out the Iran war? The answer is brutally simple, and it's the most important lesson in this entire story. As of April 2026, only 27 F-15EXs had been delivered. 27. A strike at Boeing in 2025 badly delayed production. You can't build an air campaign around a fleet that barely exists. You need enough aircraft to sustain rotations, absorb losses, and hold readiness. Meanwhile, the older F-15E Strike Eagle had more than 100 jets already deployed across the region, fully integrated with established bases and logistics. So the Pentagon sent the proven fleet and kept its newest jets home. And that war proved something the Air Force can no longer ignore. 13,000 targets in 5 weeks is a rate of munitions consumption that current procurement cannot sustain. The Iran campaign didn't reveal a need for more exotic technology. It revealed a need for capacity, mass, payload, endurance, magazines. The 2027 budget responded exactly that way. $3 billion for 24 more Eagle IIs. The total order raised to 267. JASSM cruise missile procurement doubled to 821. AMRAAM tripled to 1,317. The war made the case for the Eagle II by demonstrating precisely what America ran short of. And there's a footnote from that same conflict that lands like a punchline. While America's own Eagle II stayed stateside, a Qatari F-15QA, the export cousin the EX was derived from, shot down 2 Iranian Su-24 bombers. The airframe's combat record grew in a war its newest American version never entered. Poland's now weighing a purchase to counter Russia. Israel's buying them for long-range missions. The order books are filling. None of this makes the Eagle II cheap, roughly $90 million a copy. And no modern fighter is affordable in any ordinary sense, nor does it make the F-15EX something it isn't. It cannot penetrate the densest air defenses on the first night of a war. That job belongs to the F-22, the F-35, and someday the F-47. But it was never meant to. Against fourth-generation adversaries at long range with an enormous magazine and a data link to stealthy eyes ahead of it, the Eagle II is exactly the aircraft the Air Force needed yesterday rather than 15 years from now. That's the quiet lesson underneath the whole story. In an age obsessed with revolution, with the newest, stealthiest, most secret thing on the drawing board, American engineers took a design that first flew more than 50 years ago and made it relevant again. Not out of nostalgia, because time never erased what made the F-15 great. It made those qualities matter more. Built to fight the Soviet Union, the Eagle outlived the country it was designed to face, watched 2 generations of stealth fighters arrive, and adapted to a war its designers could not have imagined. Sometimes evolution beats revolution. So what matters more, novelty or reliability? Stealth or a wall of missiles under the wings? Combat lasers or fuel tanks deep enough to cross an ocean without a tanker? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are more legends in the American arsenal, and their stories are far from over. See you soon.